In the spring of 1982, the cold winds of Leningrad were finally giving way to a shy spring. The snow on the sidewalks had melted into gray puddles, and people hurried through the streets with heavy coats still on their shoulders. Inside a small apartment on the fourth floor of a concrete housing block, a quiet family was packing for what seemed like an ordinary trip abroad, something very few Soviet citizens were ever allowed to do. Sergei Ivanovich, a hard-working engineer, had been given permission to attend a trade exhibition in Helsinki. His wife, Yelena, a schoolteacher, would accompany him as part of the delegation. Their 7-year-old son, Misha, was allowed to join them, a small reward for Sergei's loyal service to the state. For weeks, the family had been preparing carefully. They were told what to wear, what to say, and even how to behave in front of foreigners. Every detail mattered. A single wrong word could be misunderstood by the authorities. Misha didn't understand any of this. He was just excited. He had seen pictures of Finland, green parks, bright toy shops, and streets filled with cars that looked nothing like the ones at home. To him, it felt like a dream. But beneath the excitement, Yelena felt uneasy. She had grown up hearing stories of people who went abroad and were never the same again. Some were accused of betrayal, others simply disappeared. Before leaving, she stood by the window, watching her son play with a small wooden airplane. "Just a few days," she whispered to herself, "then we'll be home." None of them could have known that this short trip, meant to show loyalty to their country, would soon turn their lives upside down. Because sometimes in the Soviet Union, even a smile in the wrong direction could make you an enemy of the state. The train from Leningrad to Helsinki was slow and silent. Soldiers checked passports at every border stop, and passengers sat stiffly, afraid to draw attention. For Misha, though, it was an adventure. He pressed his face to the window, watching the snow-covered forest blur by. When they finally arrived in Finland, the air felt different, cleaner, freer. Helsinki's streets were bright with colors that Misha had never seen before. His parents walked close together, cautious but curious. On the second day, they visited a small bookstore near the hotel. Yelena loved books, and she couldn't resist stepping inside. While she browsed, Misha wandered off toward the children's section. He found a colorful picture book, pages filled with animals, balloons, and a story written in English. As he flipped through it, the shopkeeper, an old Finnish man with kind eyes, smiled and said in broken Russian, "Gift." For boy, Misha grinned, said thank you, and ran to show it to his parents. Yelena smiled nervously, not wanting to seem rude, and allowed him to keep it. To her, it was just an innocent gesture. But later that evening, a Soviet officer assigned to watch the delegation noticed the book. His face turned cold. He demanded to see it, flipping through each page as if it hid a secret code. When they returned to Leningrad, the incident was already reported. A short file was opened at the KGB headquarters. Subject: Ivanovich Sergei, engineer. Possible contact with Western agents through foreign national. Child received printed material. It was a small note in a large system. But in 1982, even a child's picture book could be seen as evidence of treason. From that moment on, the Ivanovich family was no longer ordinary. They were being watched. Life returned to normal, or so it seemed. The Ivanovich family went back to their apartment, Sergei to his factory, Yelena to her classroom, and little Misha to school. But something in the air had changed. The neighbors, once friendly, had grown distant. People greeted them politely but with tight smiles. Sometimes Yelena noticed a man standing near the entrance of their building, pretending to read a newspaper. Once she saw the same man near the grocery store. At night, the phone would ring. When Sergei picked it up, there was silence. Only breathing. He tried to ignore it. "It's nothing," he told Yelena. "Maybe it's just a mistake." But deep down, he knew better. He had seen what happened to people who attracted attention. In the Soviet Union, once you were marked by the KGB, You were never free again. At the factory, Sergei was called into a friendly meeting. 3 men waited for him, one in a suit, two in military coats. They asked strange questions. Who did you meet abroad? Did you speak to any Western journalists? What did your son receive from the foreign man? Sergei answered carefully, choosing every word like stepping on thin ice. He told them the truth, that it was only a children's book. The man in the suit smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Comrade Ivanovich, you must understand that sometimes enemies use children to pass messages. Even pictures can hide information. Sergei left the meeting shaking. He went home and found Yelena sitting quietly, sewing Misha's school shirt. They asked me questions, he said softly. Yelena looked up, her eyes full of fear. Then it's begun, she whispered. From that day, their lives became a silent war, not fought with guns or bombs, but with whispers, reports, and fear. One evening, Misha sat at the kitchen table with his crayons. He loved to draw. Airplanes, soldiers, and his family standing together under the sun. That night, he decided to draw something new. On one page, he drew the Finnish bookstore. On another, he copied some English words from the picture book. He didn't understand them. They were just colorful shapes to him. When he was done, he proudly took the drawing to his father. Papa, look! I drew the shop from our trip. Sergei smiled and patted his head. Very good, Misha. You're my clever boy. He left the drawing on the table and went to answer the door when someone knocked. It was their neighbor Tatiana, stopping by for sugar. She noticed the paper and her eyes widened slightly. Oh, your boy writes in English, she asked in a sweet but curious tone. Yelena quickly said, No. He's just copying from a book. He doesn't even know what it says, Tatiana nodded, but said nothing more. The next morning, she mentioned it casually to her cousin, who happened to work for the local committee. Within days, 2 KGB agents arrived at the school. They spoke to Misha's teacher, asking if the boy ever said strange things or talked about Finland. The teacher, frightened, said Misha once mentioned colorful books and kind people. The next day, Sergei was summoned again. This time, the tone was colder. The officer placed Misha's drawing on the table. Your son, he said, seems very interested in foreign culture. Where did he learn this? Sergei froze. It was just a child's drawing, but in that small office, surrounded by silent men, it had become something dangerous. That night, Yelena burned Misha's picture book in the sink while he slept. The pages curled and blackened. She whispered, Forgive me, my son. You don't know what danger your colors have brought. It happened on a rainy night in late May. The streets outside were quiet, except for the sound of dripping water from the gutters. The Ivanovich family had gone to bed early. Misha was asleep, clutching his small wooden airplane under the blanket. Then came the knock. Loud, firm, repeated. Sergei jumped out of bed. Yelena followed, her hands trembling. She knew that kind of knock. Everyone did. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a friend. When Sergei opened the door, 3 men stood in the hallway, wearing dark coats. Behind them was a soldier with a rifle. Comrade Ivanovich, the man in front said, showing his badge. KGB, we need you and your wife to come with us for some questions. Bring identification. Yelena clutched her robe tightly. Our son. He's asleep. He will be taken care of, the man replied coldly. Misha woke up to the sound of voices. He peeked from the doorway, just in time to see his parents being let out. His mother turned her head, her eyes wet with tears. Go back to bed, Misha, she whispered. It's all right. But it wasn't all right. The neighbors' doors opened slightly as the agents led the couple down the stairs. No one said a word. In the Soviet Union, silence was safety. That night, Misha sat by the window, waiting for his parents to return. The hours passed. Morning came. The house was still empty. When a woman from the local committee arrived later that day, she smiled tightly and said, Your parents have gone on a short trip. You'll stay with relatives for now, Misha didn't understand. He only knew that his parents had been taken away, and that somehow it had something to do with the book he loved so much. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away the last trace of the life they once knew. Sergei and Yelena were taken to a gray building on the edge of Leningrad, a KGB detention center known for its silence. Inside, the air smelled of damp concrete and fear. For hours, Sergei sat in a small room lit by a single lamp. Across the table, a man in uniform leafed through a file. "You received a book from a foreigner. What did he say to you?" "Nothing," Sergei replied. "He gave it to my son." "It was just a children's book." The officer leaned forward. "You expect me to believe that?" Sergei tried to keep calm. "I am a loyal citizen. I've worked for the state for 20 years. "Exactly," the officer said, tapping the file. "You had access to factory blueprints, didn't you?" Perhaps that's what they wanted. The questions went on for hours. "Who gave you permission to travel? Did you meet anyone outside your group? Did you bring anything else home?" Every answer seemed to dig the hole deeper. In another room, Yelena faced her own interrogator, a woman with a cold smile. "Your son speaks of kind foreigners," she said. "Did they promise you a better life?" Yelena broke down crying. "We just wanted him to see the world. He's only a child." But her tears meant nothing. The interrogator wrote something in her file and said softly, "Children remember what their parents teach them." Perhaps he learned too much. Days turned into weeks. The couple was accused of spreading Western propaganda and communicating with foreign agents. No real evidence was ever shown, just suspicions, words, and fear. In the end, their fate was already decided, because in 1982, truth was not what mattered. Loyalty was, and the state had decided they had none. After that night, Misha's world fell quiet. He was sent to live with his mother's sister, Aunt Valentina, a strict woman who rarely smiled. Her small apartment smelled of cabbage soup and sadness. At first, Misha kept asking when his parents would come back. "Soon," Valentina said. "They're working somewhere far away." But her voice trembled each time she said it. Weeks turned into months, then years. No letters came, no phone calls, not even a whisper of where his parents were. When Misha asked questions at school, the teacher frowned and told him to focus on his studies. Children whispered behind his back. "His parents were traitors," one boy said. Another laughed. "KGB took them." Misha didn't fight back. He just lowered his head and went home, holding back tears. At night, he dreamed of the train to Finland, his father smiling, his mother holding his hand, the bright colors of the bookstore. Those memories became his secret place, the only part of his childhood that still felt real. One evening, while looking through old boxes in Valentina's closet, Misha found something wrapped in a handkerchief. Inside was a single burned corner of paper, a piece of the picture book his mother had destroyed. The edges were black, but a small drawing of a red balloon remained untouched. He stared at it for a long time. Then he hid it in his pocket. From that night on, he stopped asking questions. He grew up quiet, careful, and afraid of drawing attention, just like his parents once were. By the time he turned 18, the Soviet Union was falling apart. But for Misha, the silence about his family remained as strong as ever. And deep inside, one thought never left him. What if the truth about my parents wasn't what I was told? Years later, the Soviet Union was gone. The new Russia was changing fast. New shops, new music, new freedoms. Misha, now in his late 20s, worked as a mechanic. He lived alone, spoke little, and avoided politics. One day, while repairing a car for an elderly man, he overheard a conversation about old KGB records being opened to the public. People are finding out what really happened to their families, the man said. Some of those files go back decades. That night, Misha couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. The next morning, he took the train to the city archive. The building was cold and quiet. Behind the counter sat a woman with glasses and tired eyes. Name? She asked. Ivanovich, he said. Sergei and Yelena? My parents. She typed something into the computer. For a long time, there was silence. Then she looked up slowly. There is a file, she said softly. Classified, but it may be available now. When Misha opened the folder, his hands trembled. Inside were yellowed pages stamped top secret. There were reports, interrogation notes, and a document marked sentence. It said, executed by order of the state, December 1982. Reason, treason and contact with foreign intelligence. Misha froze. His breath caught in his throat. His parents, the kind, gentle people who had loved him, had been killed because of a child's picture book. For hours he sat in silence, reading the cold, official words that had erased his family. But in the last pages, something strange appeared. A letter written by his father before the execution. Tell my son we never betrayed anyone. We only loved him. That was our only crime. Tears filled Misha's eyes. He finally knew the truth, but the truth broke him. Still, deep down, he made a promise. The world will know their story. Days passed after Misha discovered the file. He carried the letter everywhere, folded neatly inside his jacket. But one thing kept haunting him. The reports mentioned a witness number. 4. Someone who had provided valuable information. No name, just a number. He began searching for answers. He visited old neighbors, former teachers, anyone who might remember his parents. Most turned him away politely. Some looked frightened, even after all those years. Then one afternoon, a retired man from their old building agreed to speak. His name was Pavel. His voice was weak, but his memory was sharp. I remember the night they came, Pavel said quietly. The KGB. Everyone knew, but no one dared to speak. Misha asked, do you know who reported them? Pavel hesitated, then sighed. It was your neighbor, Tatiana. She thought they were planning to run away. She said she heard your mother speaking about Finland. She only wanted to protect herself. Misha felt his chest tighten. He remembered her face, the woman who smiled as she borrowed sugar, who once gave him candy. Pavel continued, after your parents were taken, Tatiana disappeared for a while. When she came back, she looked different, quiet, afraid. Maybe she regretted it. Misha left without a word. He walked for hours through the city streets, past the same gray buildings, past the same walls that had once watched his family vanish. That night, he stood by the river, staring at the reflection of the city lights. For years, he had lived under the shadow of a lie. Now he finally knew the truth, and it was heavier than he imagined. His parents had been innocent, and their only crime was being seen as curious in a country that feared curiosity. Months later, Misha returned to Finland for the first time. He carried only a small suitcase and his father's letter. The bookstore still stood in the same place, though the paint was faded and the sign was new. Inside, shelves were filled with bright books and quiet music played in the background. An old man stood behind the counter. Not the same one, but when Misha explained why he had come, the man smiled kindly. I remember hearing story, he said. A Russian family came here once, long ago. There was trouble afterward. Misha nodded, unable to speak. He walked through the aisles until he found a book, a children's story with balloons on the cover, just like the one he had lost. He opened it slowly, his hands trembling. Tears filled his eyes. It wasn't the book, he whispered. It was never the book. He bought it, stepped outside, and sat on a bench near the street where his parents had once walked. The spring air felt the same, soft, cold, alive. From his pocket, he took out the burned scrap of paper he had saved since childhood. He placed it between the pages of the new book and closed it gently, like closing an old wound. For a long time, he sat there watching people pass. Families, children laughing, free to speak, free to dream. Then he whispered to himself, "They took my parents, but they couldn't take their love." He stood, looked toward the sky, and smiled faintly. "You're free now," he said softly. "All of us are." Misha walked away, leaving the book on the bench, a quiet tribute to a family destroyed by fear and a world finally learning from its own silence.